Good morning, everybody. I would really like to title this particular video, The Gods Must Be Crazy. Now, I really believe that all of humanity is longing for the ultimate thing. And the ultimate thing is the closest kind of relationship that we can really have with God. But it is also the incredible desire for sonship, to have our place with God, to restore the magic of heaven, and basically the long lost memory of the garden being restored. And I believe that all of us have this incredible desire and this incredible drive. And I really think that the whole journey to the promised land that we see God take through the garden or through the wilderness to the promised land is basically a preparation where people really believe in God as their Savior. But as they're going through the wilderness, they're basically trying to learn how to be those people that God calls them to be, and to be able to manifest and demonstrate the character of God. I've mentioned this before in some of my previous videos, and I really believe that this is really the ultimate thing. So as we see people journeying towards this ultimate place with God, and also to the point where we're no longer working it from our lower nature, but we are actually really still looking at God and wanting some of His divine nature. You know, God really demonstrates to us through Jesus Christ what the ultimate sonship looks like. He shows what the ultimate divine nature looks like. And He basically spells it out to us in the New Testament that we know that we have really fully arrived when we're able to forgive our enemies and we're able to bless those who curse us. If we go right back to the wilderness wanderings, we really see that it was not easy going through the wilderness. It was hard. You know, there was grumbling, there was complaining, there were water shortages, there were food shortages, it was dry, and it was difficult. And I also mentioned before that we also see an issue with unity as well, that this group was dependent on each other. You know, one person couldn't just race to the promised land. The promised land was literally the melding of this entire group together. So it wasn't just an individual manifesting this sort of divine nature. It was really the whole group making it to the promised land. That being said, as they're wandering through and they're going through the hardness of difficulty and tragedy and hardship, you can see that there is a lot of frustration that the people are manifesting towards God. You can see that they are annoyed with their circumstances. They remember the goodness of being in slavery in Egypt, and they kind of would like to go back, and all these other different things. We also see that Moses in the group, at one of the times when the people were really complaining and so on and so forth, God gives him the command to actually take a stick and hit a rock that was following them. So it wasn't just a rock, but we can assume, and many Bible scholars assume, that it was a manifestation of Jesus Christ, or it could have been a person who was a son. Because we see, for example, King Solomon, he was born as a son, and you could definitely sort of interplay how Solomon was into how Jesus is, and so on and so forth. So it was either a sort of pre-incarnation of Jesus Christ, or it was an individual who was a son, who was considered a rock. And God basically commands that Moses should go ahead and hit the rock. And I think that we can really, we don't understand it, but when we get really bitter at God, and we really get bitter at our circumstances, and we get really bitter about how life has treated us and our families have treated us, or things that haven't happened that we wish it happened, we can often find a person who is as much like God as possible, who has a lot of the divine nature, who's forgiving and who's loving and who blesses us even when we're mad, we can take a stick and we can hit them. And a son, according to the New Testament, is one who forgives. So once they forgive and they ask for blessing instead of, say, judgment and punishment, water rushes out of that rock and it goes to the person who hits them. So there is a temporary relief, and there is a feeling of God's love and His forgiveness, and we're taking in His grace, and so on and so forth. However, the problem is that we can get the idea that hitting the rock repeatedly and just allowing that rock to just continuously bring forth refreshment is the way that we can kind of have a taste of the promised land while we're still traveling through the wilderness to get to the promised land, and will help us ultimately get to the promised land. The devil really tells us, just keep on hitting that person who represents Jesus Christ the most to you, and you're just going to keep on getting some refreshment until you make it there. And while I do believe that sometimes it doesn't just take 2 times, God knows exactly the people He's working with, and He understands all the circumstances and situations. But in the Old Testament, we see it that they had one chance where they were able to hit the rock, and the second time where they were supposed to speak to the rock, and that was supposed to bring refreshment. But Moses had allowed the journey and the hardships of the journey and the responsibility of carrying all those people to really embitter his heart. So instead of really submitting to what God had told him to and to speak to the rock, he grabbed a stick and he hit the rock. So here we have a manifestation of Jesus Christ, who basically even allowed that rock to get hit one time in order to bring refreshment to the people. But unfortunately, Moses, he couldn't deal with his own bitterness and his own resentment. So he just kept on commanding the people to keep on beating the rock. And of course, this lost him and the entire nation of Israel the promised land. And no account of his begging or pleading was ever going to change God's mind, because Moses had revealed something. Now we might wonder, well, why was God so hard on Moses? Why would he be so difficult when Moses had it so hard? And, all of us, really, I know that the Bible even said that it wasn't just Moses, that the people themselves were such a pain in Moses's rear end that was one of the reasons why he got frustrated and hit the rock the second time. So people, we're all connected, and Moses' mistake was everyone's mistake, and everyone ended up dying in the wilderness, never having made it to the promised land because of what Moses had done. So this is very strange, and we really, really wonder, well, isn't that a little bit rough of God to do to poor Moses, or whichever way? However, when we look in the book of Revelations, we see a very interesting thing. And we see, in Revelations, was it 12 or 15? I think it's Revelations 12. We see the story of the woman who's trying to give birth to the Son, who will rule the nations with an iron rod. And we see that she has angels, and she has stars, and she has the moon, and she, there's something very beautiful about this woman, and so on and so forth. But we see that a war breaks out, and we see that Satan and his angels are up in heaven at the throne of God, accusing and condemning the people of God who have been blood washed. And you can really ask yourself, well, how did Satan get in heaven in the first place? And who is he, and who are his angels? And I think that this is a very, very important question to ask us, because we can say that they are Christians of every single walk, of every single level. who refuse to submit to the lordship of Jesus Christ and forgiving Christians who are bought by the blood of Jesus. They keep on ruling over them with legalism and religiosity. And they constantly keep real Christians from salvation because they are too busy condemning and accusing them at the throne of God. So we see war break out, and we see Satan cast out with all of his angels. Now, if we read in the book of Matthew, we see that there is a judgment going on with Jesus Christ, and Jesus is separating the sheep from the goats. And you could definitely say that on earth, while we're going through the wilderness, because all of us go through a wilderness, unless we're born a son, and we already have that particular divine nature from the time we're very, very young, we all have the opportunity, as soon as we believe in Jesus Christ, to make it to the coveted place where we are sons. We all want that. Every single person on this planet wants to be a son. And we all have an opportunity through Jesus Christ to make it to sonship. But that really, truly takes doing it God's way through forgiveness and love, and even submitting to the wilderness and dryness and difficulty and hardship. And, and trying to do that successfully and navigate it with, a certain amount of faith and a certain amount of trust in God, and a certain amount of ability to really believe and to trust in Him. And you have, as we go through that wilderness, pretty much as soon as we start entering in, we get this opportunity to speak to the rock or to hit the rock once again. And the devil tries to tell all of us, oh, just hit that rock, hit that rock, hit that rock a second time, you'll get more refreshment. But actually that is what costs them the promised land. And if by the time Jesus comes back, either the final apocalyptic moment, or through a visitation, or through a time of judgment, which can happen, if you are found to be accusing your brothers and your sisters, if you are found to be condemning them, if you are found to be tearing people up and just beating them up and so on and so forth. I'm not talking about proper judgment here. I'm talking about false accusations. I'm talking about condemnations. I'm talking about nitpicking and criticizing and overcorrecting. Then unfortunately, there's going to be a separation, and you're going to be hurled out of heaven with the devil and his demons. Because the dragon and the angels that were up there were probably people who were really saved, really believed in Jesus, but they just simply would not submit to His lordship. And His lordship is always made manifest through forgiveness and through love of the brethren. If you are beating the son, if you are beating the person who looks like a son, who is forgiving, this is a surefire sign that you are in rebellion against God and His authority, and you are trying to make it to sonship, but you're trying to make it through the character of the devil, which is, I will ascend to heaven, I will surpass the stars of God, I will, and that is the voice of Satan. And I believe the book of Isaiah. Ooh, I need to reread the book of Isaiah to make sure that I'm right about that. But so in the end, when Jesus comes to really, really look at people's work, He's looking and He's judging between the works that we do and so on and so forth. And if He sees that you are condemning and hurting people and displaying the character of the devil rather than the character of God, you won't make it to the promised land. You won't make it to the stars of God. You won't make it. You will be hurled down to heaven. And this is a very serious thing.